Welcome to Issues That Matter. I'm Cynthia Pooler. I have a distinguished panel with me, my friend Scott Ritter, Diane Sayre, and Elena Oki. And Elena ran for Congress in Michigan, right?
Yes.
And Elena is originally from the Ukraine. So I'd like Elena to start off and discuss the Ukraine and what she knows and what she thinks about President Zelenskyy.
Where to begin, Miss Cynthia?
Wherever you want.
Zelenskyy definitely is a character. He has been, I don't want to say undiscovered by American public because of the certain image that has been projected of him. He is a shrewd businessman. He definitely had successful career as an entertainer. The downside of his political, I would say, involvement is that in his days, and I watched a lot of interviews with him when he ran for presidency in Ukraine, that he actually performed in front of a lot of dignitaries, including Russian former president, Mr. Medvedev, Belarusian president, Lukashenko. So his performer's career actually had him in the realm of a lot of high-end politicians, but at that time, he was just an entertainer. So to some extent, there may be a part of him, as Biden mentioned yesterday at the press conference, all politics is personal, he said. Well, if we believe Biden, then the politics may be personal to Mr. Zelenskyy. I have watched the interviews with his former chief of staff, the man who helped him run and win presidency. Unfortunately, he didn't have a lot of accolades to sing to Zelenskyy. He said all Zelenskyy cares is about applause. And he lives from one presentation to next presentation, from one photo shoot to next photo shoot. I was quite taken aback by such characterization of his former boss, but Zelenskyy is a complicated figure. He definitely has not delivered on his promise to Ukrainian people. When he ran in 2019, he promised that he will stop shelling Donbass, that Ukraine had been shelling since 2014. After the coup that was obviously sponsored by the West, United States and EU, and Victoria Nuland handpicked the government in Ukraine in 2014. So Zelenskyy was seen by Ukrainian people as a savior. When he had debates with Poroshenko at the time, in 2019, Ukrainian president, Zelenskyy said to Poroshenko, "I am not your opponent, I'm your sentence." I watched the debates, that's what he said. And Ukrainian people applauded him, and they hoped that finally the war that started in 2014, when Ukraine shelled their own people in Donbass area, will stop. But Zelenskyy did not deliver on that promise. Zelenskyy did not follow Minsk agreements that Russia and obviously Ukraine had figured out, and they were supposed to be in place, and ceasefire was supposed to work. But Zelenskyy didn't deliver on that. So he's a big disappointment, in my view, for Ukrainian people who voted for him. He did not stop the war, but he brought Ukraine into a bigger war now, and a more tragic war, and more losses of Ukrainian lives. And it's tragic for the world, tragic for all the refugees and the people of United States. It's tragedy as well, because we're being sold lies and we're being robbed as American taxpayers, funding the war that kills more Ukrainians while we're told that we're saving Ukraine. Nothing could be more opposite from the truth.
So overall, what did you think of his speech? And what did you think of Congress's reaction to the speech?
I thought it was absolutely insane that Congress gave a standing ovation and applause. I'm sure Zelenskyy loved it because that's what he lives for, the applause. But I thought that his speech, he talked about Russians being terrorists and Russians sending convicts to the front lines. Of course, he didn't mention that he was the one who released all the prisoners and with military experience and sent them to the front line himself. So a lot of things that he said basically were political capital to make sure Congress looks favorably about shelling more American taxpayer money and put it in his pockets to fuel this war machine. It was a disappointment. He did speak with Biden at the press conference and said that he wants just peace. So we don't have peace anymore. It has to be just. And of course, in Ukrainian media, everybody was angry to hear the word peace coming out of Biden's and Zelensky's mouth. I obviously am fluent in Ukrainian and Russian. So they're all very appalled, saying, what peace? We want to fight Russia. We want to win. We want to take Crimea. Stop talking about peace, Zelenskyy and Biden. And obviously, some of Ukrainian influencers already dreaming that each Ukrainian family will receive $1 million for each soldier who was killed in the combat. And then they toying with the notion that Russia will pay reparations, but since Russia won't have any money, we'll take their gas and oil and we'll sell it to Europe. So they have it all figured out, and that's why the Ukrainian influencers and the personalities that people listen to in Ukraine are thinking that why Zelenskyy came to United States to basically prepare capitulation of Russia. That's how it's been presented to Ukrainian people. It's insane. It's insane on both sides. I have not heard amount of lies coming from both Biden and Zelenskyy all at the same time. Pelosi with her notion that Ukraine is some type of democracy, where we know that they tie people to the poles and the lampposts and take their underwear down. And then they beat these people, the strangers, in these street medieval style lynches and accuse people of, I don't know, stealing something, not looking at somebody a correct way. That's what they do. And to perpetuate to American people that Ukraine is democracy, when Zelenskyy banned all opposition channels, he put in jail all opposition leaders. His party is Servant of the People is pretty much the only party that's left. All independent media is banned. Then churches, now he has a war in church. The soldiers from Ukrainian front lines are making TikTok videos begging Zelenskyy to stop closing the churches. I watched the video of the mother on her knees begging Ukrainian soldiers, please do not close the church. Let me bury my son. That's how much they dislike everything that has to do with Russia. Russian Orthodox Church is now banned. They want to nationalize all the property. And this is democracy. You cannot speak Russian language even if it's your native language, and this is how you speak your whole life. So the schools now are banned from providing the lessons in Russian. This is not democracy. We have been sold the bag of goods by Zelenskyy and Biden. And for Biden to stand there at the conference and invoke Hanukkah, and Zelenskyy being a Jew, and telling us how great things are and how wonderful that the Zelenskyy is a Jew and here's a Hanukkah. Well, I am reading on Ukrainian news that the rabbi was arrested by Ukrainian special services for allowing Russian soldiers to pray at the synagogue. What? So it's very frustrating, and it's really hard to watch what's happening in current day Ukraine, and how Stepan Bandera, Ukrainian nationalist who collaborated with Hitler, is now a national hero, and how he is being basically hailed and glorified through his slogan, "A glory to Ukraine," or "Hail Ukraine, hail heroes," has become a national slogan of official military forces of Ukraine. And we hear Pelosi promoting the slogan and repeating it in Congress. A slogan of the people of Stepan Bandera followers, the people who are responsible for slaughters of hundreds of thousands of Jewish people, Polish people, Romani people, you name it, ethnic cleansings. These people participated in during World War II on behalf of Hitler. Stepan Bandera was their leader. He was a leader of volunteer SS Galicia division of Ukrainian nationalists supporting Hitler. This is who Ukraine now has its national hero. And we have Azov battalion and other formations of Ukrainian military that are openly professing very bad things that they would like to do to Jewish people and other ethnic groups alike. And we have Biden lying to us and telling us that Ukraine is this beautiful place for Jews, beautiful place for all the people, and how democratic that country is. Therefore, we need to keep shelling more US taxpayer dollars, and let's give another 45 billion. Like the 100 billion is not enough. Let's do another 45 on top of it. So sorry for the long speech, but I hope I touched on some of the things. And it's obviously something I can talk more about.
You know, Scott and I have talked about a particular issue a few times. How come people in the United States, particularly in the United States, because that's where we live, how come there's no outcry by the Jewish people? How come Chuck Schumer and Jamie Raskin are supporting this, this person in the Ukraine when they're, hurting Jewish people? I don't understand why there's no outcry that this is happening in this country. What do you think?
Me or Scott?
Yes. No, you.
Me? In 2014, when a horrific massacre of Ukrainian people who live in Odessa happened, I'm sorry, I hope I don't tear when I say that.
That's okay.
I watched what happened. I printed the horrific photographs and I came to synagogue. And I was showing to people in the synagogue and telling them what just happened, how the people were rounded up into the trade union building, the people who peacefully protested the coup that took place in Ukraine in 2014 and that took down the legally elected president of Ukraine back then, the people who peacefully opposed to that coup and to the removal of legally elected president, they were peacefully protested, but then the thugs and the neo-Nazis rounded them into the building of a trade union center and set them up on fire. They burned alive. Those who tried to escape jumped through the windows. They were shot as they were falling, and they were beaten up if they were being able to make it to the ground alive. And the police was standing nearby and doing nothing. And unfortunately, the people at the synagogue to whom I've shown that, because Odessa is known that one of the very heavily populated Jewish city, a lot of people know Odessa. In the United States, a lot of people's ancestors came from the Odessa. They looked at me like I was from the moon. They didn't believe it. And they didn't think that it could be possible because it seems so outrageous that the people will be burned alive in Ukraine when on TV, nothing like this was shown. And all of a sudden I come and show all of this and they're looking, a lot of people were sort of in disbelief. And a lot of people, you say these things happening, their immediate response is, how come I don't see this on TV? Because their only point of reference and trustworthy source is, let's say, CNN or Fox News or something that they see on TV. And our media has been complicit in silencing the truth, in suppressing the truth. And therefore, my thought that the people in the Jewish community, as well as in other communities of the United States, basically are in the dark of what is happening in Ukraine. Tragically so, because recently at one funeral I attended, the rabbi's wife came up to me and she did remember. And she said, Elena, I remember you told us about this in 2014. Can you imagine how many years have passed for her to realize that I told them about something that now they see it's coming to light that yes, there are problems in Ukraine. But when I was telling them in real time in 2014, it seemed like this is something out of worldly. But here, when she met me in passing at somebody's funeral recently, she came up and she remembered that. And I thought to myself, if only you believed me when I told you about it. Timing is very important in life. If timing in 2014, if people knew, and if media wasn't complicit to suppressing the truth about Ukraine, if people would call and contact their representatives and spoke about what's happening in Ukraine, I did. I got on the phone, I called every senator, every congressman when I saw the Odessa massacre on the May the 2nd, 2014. And I called everybody, I said, stop immediately, stop that bloodshed. Would you think anybody would react? No. I sent letters. I sent letter to my senator here in Michigan. I've received a letter from her. She's the only one who responded saying, oh yeah, we know things are happening in Ukraine. That's all Putin's fault. And I met with Ukrainian diaspora and we decided that it's all Putin's fault and Putin's gonna pay for everything he does. So official narrative since 2014 was that it wasn't Ukraine that's killing its own people, which is the fact, but it as if it's Putin doing it. So therefore, it's all Putin's fault. So how do you even place Ukraine in this narrative in the form of any kind of rebuke if it's all Putin's fault? And from senators to media to everyone else, people are just promoting the same lie and the same narrative that hurts Ukrainian people, that hurts American people, because the lies have never saved any lives yet.
Diane?
Yes. The question is why Americans aren't responding, or what do you want me to say?
Just overall, your impression of the speech. And I think, the fact that there isn't much of a, outcry from the Jewish people about this.
Sure. I mean, there's certain problems like the Anti-Defamation League running cover for organized crime, which there's an awful lot of in Ukraine. So I guess they feel sympathetic toward them. But there is some, and it's very much suppressed, as we now know from Twitter. They were basically the same agency as the FBI and the Central Command. So you have the social media, which people consider to be more free than the mainstream media, nonetheless totally run as part of the military intelligence apparatus. So one, as Elena just said, people actually don't know. Number two, if they do know, they are suppressed. As you know, myself, Scott, many other people have found themselves on these Ukrainian kill lists. Now, the latest, the Center for Countering Disinformation has released a third edition of their list, and my name is not on it. Maybe Kirsten Gillibrand was upset that I would have this every time I see her. So for the moment, at least, I'm not on that list. I don't know about Mirat Foretz. So that's one problem, the censorship in the United States. The other is there's a collapse of morality, which we just have to bring back into being. The thing that I found so gut-wrenching is watching Zelenskyy giving this speech about how Ukraine is winning, knowing that hundreds of thousands of people, over 100,000 of his own hold on a second. Hold on 1 minute. So here he is talking about the victory when people are being slaughtered. They have no electricity, no heat, and he doesn't care. How can that be a head of state? How can that person run a country who has no concern in the least for the well-being of his people? And then the Congress, I said on another interview, I was happy that he and Nancy Pelosi kept their clothes on when they were making out in the front of the room. It was a little alarming. But it was like an orgy, and they were all there wanting to be seen for their sponsors and patrons. Maybe a whole bunch of them have investments with Lockheed Martin and Raytheon. I know Raytheon is big in Mississippi, and you have that senator, that crazy Senator Wicker in Mississippi, who keeps calling for dropping nuclear bombs on Russia. So I was very disturbed by that. I think the American people have got to get themselves mobilized. They've got to let the Congress know what they think of this insanity in a much more vocal way. And also, as you probably know, I agree with the Schiller Institute emphasis and Helga Zepp-LaRouche that you had this interesting offer from the Vatican to hold negotiations with no preconditions between Ukraine and Russia. Now, obviously, the problem isn't Ukraine and Russia, it's the US, the UK, and NATO. But what I found particularly interesting was that the Pope apologized for making derogatory comments about the Georgian soldiers. And then Maria Zakharova, the spokeswoman for the Russian Foreign Ministry, said, this is what you need if you're going to negotiate, that people have to be willing to admit when they've made mistakes. So she said, we will put this behind us. Now, Biden has made so many blunders and are discussing Congress. Can they own up to that? If they would just change their policy, I suppose we could let them off without insisting they come out and publicly beat themselves, although they deserve it. But there's got to be a change. And I must say, I found the whole thing very, very disturbing, knowing the human suffering that is a result of this and seeing people carry it on with such nonchalance and ease.
Scott?
Well, I found the entire Zelenskyy affair to be a Hollywood movie production. First of all, let's just be frank here. What was this about? This is about a political ploy by the Biden administration to push a $45 billion funding package through a lame duck Congress, knowing that if they waited until a new Congress was seated, there might be some uncomfortable questions asked about accountability, where this money's going, how it's being spent, et cetera. So the decision was already made, because the same people who've been funding this war in Ukraine are the same people in power at this point in time. They've already made a decision to approve the $45 billion. There was no reason for Zelenskyy to come here, none whatsoever. Zelenskyy isn't asking for money. Zelenskyy is operating off a script. This is a made-for-TV moment. Zelenskyy went to someplace in Ukraine. He claims it's Bakhmut. Some people might take question with that.
Yeah.
So we don't know that he went to Bakhmut, but he met with the heroes of Bakhmut, heroes in quotation. He awarded medals. This is very important that he had to give away a medal, because that's a prop in the movie. And then he received an autographed flag. Again, very important. Zelenskyy, the leader of Ukraine, meeting with the heroes of Bakhmut, issuing orders of military merit and receiving the signed flag. Then he gets on a U.S. Air Force plane, flies to Washington, D.C., where he has a made-for-TV moment with Biden, where he gives Biden a medal. Gives Biden a medal. Says, here, this is a medal from one of the heroes. A HIMARS operator, by the way, a captain. Then he goes to Congress and he gives a speech. The other thing about the speech, Pelosi called it the best speech ever delivered in Congress. Best speech ever delivered in Congress. I will make the following guarantee. In 1 week's time, nobody will be talking about Zelenskyy's speech. And in 1 month's time, nobody will remember a single word from Zelenskyy's speech. It wasn't the best speech ever given. It was one of the worst speeches ever given. It doesn't matter, because it was all TV. It was to create political cover. He delivered the flag. The flag of Ukraine was delivered to the US Congress and draped proudly for the whole world to see, even including the SS runes that were written on the flag by the brave defenders of Bakhmut, who are all Nazis to begin with. But this is okay. Congress has shown a proclivity for inviting Azov into the people's house and promoting their hateful ideology, even though Congress continues to put a paragraph on the defense Authorization Act that prohibits U.S. taxpayer money being used to train as of. That's never been adhered to. We train them, we give them money, we embrace them, we let them into Congress, the whole thing. But the entire Zelenskyy debacle, it just shows how far Zelenskyy has allowed Ukraine and the position of the Ukraine president to be debased and humiliated. This is a man who, his own head of defense force, General Zelenskyy, in an interview given to The Economist a week or so back, said straight up. And what's interesting about that interview is that Zelenskyy was present, didn't say a word. He was there, but he wasn't there. The only person speaking was Zelenskyy. And Zelenskyy said some interesting things. Of course, as a general, he's very cocky. I can beat these guys, he said about the Russians. I can beat them. But there's the important caveat. First, you got to give me 300 tanks, 500 infantry fighting vehicles, 500 artillery pieces, unlimited ammunition. I mean, this is sort of like Hitler down in the bunker during the movie Downfall at the end, with surrounded by his generals looking at a map of Berlin, moving imaginary armies. He could have defeated the Russians if only he had the armies that he was moving so available on paper. The army that Zelenskyy says he needs doesn't exist and will never exist. They will never receive this equipment. They don't have the ability to absorb this equipment. So now we come to the rest of Zelenskyy's statement, which was very important because he made it in front of Zelenskyy. He said, the Russians are capable fighters. They're getting ready to launch an offensive that we can't beat. They're going to beat us. Unless you give us the equipment we need, they're going to win, and there's nothing I can do to stop them. And Zelenskyy, the commander-in-chief, was silent, didn't say a word. So now Zelenskyy comes rolling into Washington, and he got a little off script. You see, he was just supposed to come there and read a script. He doesn't write those speeches. You know he doesn't write those speeches.
Yeah.
They're written for him by the CIA. We know this. The CIA has all but admitted this. The famous statement, I don't need a ride, I need ammo, that he allegedly gave back in March. It was a CIA statement. Zelenskyy never said it. Zelenskyy has no original thought. He's purely the actor that he has always been, operating from a script written by others. He was supposed to come to Washington, D.C. and play the fool that gives everybody the political cover to vote for $45 billion. And therefore, when the questions come up about accountability, they say, we did it because Zelenskyy needed the help. Everybody was on board. Everybody bought into this. This is basically the mafia's equivalent of getting everybody to fire a bullet into the corpse, because now everybody has bought into this concept, bought into the notion of support. But the fact of the matter is, Zelenskyy tried to go off script. Oh, no, I need 2 Patriot batteries, not 1. Slap down. Bam. I need M1 Abrams tanks. Bam. I need F-16s. Bam, stay on script, Zelenskyy. You're not supposed to speak about what you need because you're never going to get it. Here's the thing. This poor, pathetic excuse of a national leader stood in front of the U.S. Congress playing a script that where everybody applauded him, treated him like a hero, but he's not. He's a tool being used by the United States to promote a war that has nothing to do with advocating for Ukraine. But as Lindsey Graham said, we're willing to let Ukraine fight to the last Ukrainian because all we want to do is bring harm to Russia. We're going to sacrifice Ukraine, sacrifice the Ukrainian people, sacrifice the Ukrainian nation, and you, Zelenskyy, stay on script. That's your fate. And this means that the man is the most pathetic national leader that has ever existed. He allowed himself to be used as a political tool in an American political machine, where we're going to say whatever we need to say right now to provide political cover for $45 billion of U.S. taxpayer money without any desire to actually do something to help people of Ukraine. If we wanted to help the people of Ukraine, we'd be pushing for a peace treaty right now, because Ukrainians are going to die in numbers that people can't even begin to imagine when the Russians start this offensive. When winter kicks in, when the economy collapses, the people of Ukraine are going to pay the price, and it's the death of the Ukrainian nation. I hate to say that in front of you, Elena, because I know you're Ukrainian, you love your country, and I feel for you. But thanks to Zelenskyy, thanks to the American politicians, Ukraine is dead. There is no hope for Ukraine. It's do svidaniya. That's it. That's where I stand, Cynthia.
Well,
Elena?
small correction. I'm an American, Scott. I am from Ukraine, but I'm
Okay.
American citizen. So yes, my heart bleeds for Ukraine, but my heart bleeds for every country which would have been treated the same way. I know that you've been outspoken about Iraq when that was in play. Then we also are in Syria. So Ukraine is not the only country that has suffered under the boot of democracy loving and democracy promoting United States of America in a few decades, which is a tragedy. In this case for Ukrainian people, in those cases for other nations. And my thought when Scott rightfully so mentioned something we always have to reiterate is that the whole goal of Ukraine and militarizing Ukraine and basically creating Ukraine into this anti-Russia project was not to do anything with Ukraine. It has always been to weaken Russia. It was always the goal to change regime, weaken Russia, break Ukraine from Russia. And that was the goal of the coup in 2014. And at the time, Victoria Nuland, when she traveled and spoke to the business people in Kiev, capital of Ukraine, she said that the United States invested $5 billion to bring democratic changes to Ukraine. You can look it up. Chevron was sponsoring that meeting with Victoria Nuland. The video is on YouTube. So all of these years, Ukraine has been groomed, prepared, and basically now used as this huge mallet to put dents in Russia's stability, to bring down Russia. A lot of people in Ukraine are salivating, and they're showing each other different maps on what pieces Russia is going to break and in how many pieces and who is going to get what. It's insane. Ukrainian people are dying en masse. Western media, as well as Ukrainian media, doesn't cover that. Scott is correct. It's all Hollywood production. The only thing Zelenskyy cares about, according to his own former chief of staff, is applause and ratings. And that's what he dreams and what he lives from. And so Biden obliges and creates him this photo shoot opportunities, a Vogue photo shoot when the people are dying in his home country. Zelenskyy and his wife post for Vogue magazine cover. How exciting, isn't it? And then Mrs. Zelenskyy comes to United States, and instead of begging for peace for her countrymen, as a first lady, asks for weapons against every protocol of diplomatic event possible, and not even mention the obligation of the first lady and any human being to seek and to sue for peace in your country. But no, she asked for weapons, and so does Zelenskyy. And what's important, not only what Zelenskyy did say, something he created this new label because he's pushing for Global Peace Summit, a new term, I guess, in town. And he likes to use a word, not only the word peace, but just peace. That means reparations, and Russia do this and Russia do that. And if you think about it, Zelenskyy has never mentioned in his speech joining NATO or joining EU. And I'm thinking, like Scott dutifully noticed, that he was on script, because if he would speak for himself, he would push for NATO, he would push for EU membership. None of that, not a peep. It means he came here to do a little dog and pony show. Tucker Carlson, I believe, referred to him wearing his sweatshirt as a strip club manager, something along those lines. No offense to strip club managers. I mean, it's a job, right? But the fact that Zelenskyy shows up in Congress dressed in a sweatshirt and brings us a banner of Ukraine signed with German, what is it, Schulstaffel? What's the proper pronunciation? SS, this 2 lightning bolts, and hands it to our Speaker of the Congress, should be abominable, should be absolutely despised and spoken against by every American, and everyone should call their representative and say, this is impossible, we cannot allow this. But unfortunately, American people are too brainwashed, they're too much asleep, and they bought into the concept that Zelenskyy is this freedom fighter fighting against this evil Russia, this evil Putin, and everything that he wants, we have to sacrifice American people's life, European people's life, just to keep feeding Zelenskyy war machine to kill more Ukrainians, because that's what it does. It doesn't save Ukraine. It only brings Ukraine closer to its demise. There's a lot of people in Russia now who initially didn't understand maybe what Russia has to do in what is it doing in Ukraine. There is more people now in Russia who demand that Russia finishes the job in Ukraine, that Russia makes sure that it accomplishes all its goals, because the people of Russia now, even the ones who are on the fence regarding should we not get involved in Ukraine, they are now actually demanding more strong actions and more swift actions on behalf of Russia to deal with Ukraine and to deal with Zelenskyy after they see what Zelenskyy is doing.
Diane,
Yeah, I actually have some questions from Scott, for Scott, because I read a few different columns, one of which someone said he thought that Zelensky's trip here was to create a pretext so Biden could have a Lyndon Johnson moment and say, well, now we have to send troops or we have to do more. Is that a real possibility? What about the American troops in Estonia and Romania? I want to know, Scott, what you think about deepening American involvement. I think that would be very difficult to pull off, but I don't know what your sense of that.
Well, what I'll say on that is the numbers don't bode well for America. I mean, if Biden wants a Lyndon Johnson moment, he needs Lyndon Johnson numbers. So if for America to get meaningfully involved in Ukraine, we're talking we're going to need at least 250,000 American soldiers on the ground in Europe, with all the sustainability factors attached to that. So it's not just about bringing in the bodies. It's not just about marrying up the bodies with equipment, but having the fuel, the ammunition, the maintenance, the logistical ability to sustain such a force, in large-scale ground combat operations in Europe, and then more importantly, to have the will of the American people attached to such a movement, because the casualties will be horrific, beyond imagination. We will lose more people in a month than we lost in Vietnam in 10 years. So we're not there yet. First of all, we don't have 250,000 troops to assign to Europe anymore. Our military is greatly diminished in its ability to project power. Yes, we spent 20 years projecting power into Iraq and Afghanistan, different threat matrices involved there. This is about taking on one of the largest, most capable militaries in the world, a military that has 10 months of combat experience under its belt, a military that has learned all of the mistakes that it's made, has adapted to them. The American military still will have its Kasserine Pass moment. We always have this moment when we get involved in major conflict. Kasserine Pass, of course, being a battle in North Africa, 1943, the first time the Americans met the Germans in a meaningful fashion on the battlefield, and we got defeated because we weren't prepared for what we were about to encounter. And I can guarantee you right now, the American military is not prepared for what it would be encountering should it take on the Russians. That doesn't mean that we can't adapt. We can, but we aren't mobilized. Another thing that most Americans aren't picking up right now is the orders given by the Russian leadership to expand the Russian military to 1.5 million people, to bring on more expeditionary forces, more Marine forces, more airborne forces, more heavy artillery forces, to bring Russian defense industry up to speed for perpetual increase in production without disrupting the civilian economy. What I'm saying is that Russia is playing the long game. They are getting ready for the long conflict with the West. Meanwhile, the West is playing games with Zelenskyy, printing $45 billion, but doing nothing else. Where is our defense production? Where is our effort to bring up our military so it can do the things that some people claim we need to be prepared to do in Europe? We don't have a military capable of fighting and sustaining and prevailing in a large-scale ground conflict against a Russian-type force without going to nuclear. And if we go nuclear, everybody dies, so it doesn't matter to begin with. So I'm not worried. I mean, Biden knows this. I mean, General Miley's told him. 4,700 members of a brigade of the 101st Airborne Division will all die if they go into Ukraine. They are a light infantry force in a heavy mechanized environment of combat. They are a helicopter-borne force that would be flying into one of the most heavily defended airspaces in the world. The American forces we have in the Baltics, they will all die instantly. Not because they're not brave, not because they're not capable, but let's count the artillery pieces they have. 18, 36. So we're going to take 36 pieces of artillery, go up against the Russian equivalent that has 600 to 800 pieces of artillery. Game, set, match, it's all over. Russia wins. Wait a minute, what about the Air Force? Our Air Force has not practiced against anything remotely resembling an integrated air defense system in over 30 years. Well, I guess if you want to say Serbia in 1999. But, we've been bombing Afghanistan and Iraq without fear of any counter. We don't have the tactics. We don't have the skill set. Remember, it's one thing to read about in the book. It's another thing to actually do it. We used to have something called Red Flag, where our pilots would go to Nevada and fight in a very realistic environment, practicing to penetrate air defense systems, air-to-air combat, etc. Red Flag became a joke because that wasn't the skill set we needed. We needed to drill holes in the sky over herdsmen and wedding parties and villagers so we could drop satellite-guided bombs on them with great precision. That's the skill set we possess. We don't possess the skill set to fight the Russians in Ukraine with Russian air defense. Every military leader worth his salt should be telling his or her salt should be telling Biden this, that you should not be seeking conflict, you should be seeking conflict mitigation to avoid conflict. I don't believe the United States is going to get involved in a shooting war with Russia over Ukraine because we know we would lose that conflict. And not only will we lose it now, but based upon the decisions that Russia has made, we will lose it in perpetuity because we are not matching the Russians in terms of the mobilization. And I don't believe the American people are ready to pay the price that it would take to get our military up to the level necessary to meaningfully confront and prevail. And that's the important front. It's not just about confronting, it's about prevailing. We must win. We will run out of artillery ammunition 2 weeks into the conflict. 2 weeks into the conflict. We produce enough ammunition per year to last less than a month in meaningful conflict. So no, I'm not worried about it.
We've talked about a lot of stuff today, so I want to close it. I'm sure people who listen to this, their heads will be spinning. So let's do final thoughts, Elena.
Nancy Pelosi likened visit from President of Ukraine, Zelenskyy, as Winston Churchill. Well, my final closing thoughts, he's not Churchill. I have news from Nancy Pelosi. And he is the president who sold his people out, did not deliver on any of his campaign promises, did not deliver on his promise at his inauguration speech in 2019 to stop bombing and shelling Donbass. And he is not seeking peace and leads Ukraine to destruction. And that's a tragedy. So not the Winston Churchill moment here, Zelenskyy's visit to the United States.
Diane.
Well, I would like to urge all Americans to give some long, deep thought about our republic. It is Christmas. It is the time that George Washington surprised the Hessian troops in Trenton by crossing the Delaware. That sacrifice should not have been for nothing. And our nation has lost its identity in any meaningful sense, as you saw by the behavior of the Congress with this visit. And I've been reading George Washington's farewell address, which I would recommend highly to people. Also, I again would say that during this religious time, the fact that there is an offer for mediation from the Vatican, that people of all different faiths should push this, that there is no, this cannot end with the ideology of the West. and that requires a change from the United States. So those are my thoughts.
Scott,
First of all, I'll second everything that Elena and Diane just said. I think, look, it's Christmas time, so this would be my thought. I'd encourage anybody who listens to this to go watch the Nutcracker Suite. It's the holiday season. It's a wonderful, there's movie variants of it. You can buy records, whatever. Watch it and reflect on the fact that it was written by Tchaikovsky, a Russian. And we live in a day and age where Russian culture is under attack. We are burning Russian books. We are banning Russian language. We are shutting down, canceling Russian culture. Watch something that has been a fundamental, integral part of the American holiday season for time, forever. Since I was a child, the Nutcracker Suite was there. Watch it, appreciate it, and realize that the man who wrote it, you're being told he's your enemy. The people who embrace that culture, we're being told they're our enemy. They're not. The Russian people aren't our enemy. Russian culture is not our enemy. We need to learn to peacefully coexist with these people. And the best way to do that is to open our hearts and our minds to the possibility that the Russians are just as human as we are, want the same things that we want peace, prosperity, they want friendship, and to stop believing at face value anything any one of your elected officials tells you about Russia and the Russian people. Because if we follow their guidance, we'll be at war with Russia before we know it. And that's something that nobody wants.
what's in store for you, Elena, in 2023?
No comments at this point, just heading in here and watching things unfold. I know Diane doing something, right, Diane? You're doing something.
Yes, I declared already against Kirsten Gillibrand because I saw that various people appreciated my campaign against Schumer so greatly that I better not let a minute go by without announcing my next campaign.
Excellent.
And Scott, give a plug for your book.
Read my book.
Yes.
All I would say about the book, Disarm at the Time of Perestroika, is it's what I've said before. We're in very difficult times with Russia today. And some people say it's the worst it's ever been. And while I'm not going to in any way minimize the state of affairs, I would remind people to reflect on the 1980s when it was this bad, or in some cases worse. And what got us out of the 1980s was disarmament, and in particular the INF Treaty, which was signed in December of 1987. We just had the 35th anniversary of the signing. It began a process of meaningful, real disarmament, eliminating an entire class of nuclear weapons, and in doing so, not only engendering stability in Europe, which has been squandered, but also creating a mechanism of peaceful cooperation between enemy number one, which is what the Soviets called us, and the evil empire, which is what we called them. We created the potential for peace. So it was imperfectly implemented. We've squandered it, but this book provides a template of hope that says there is a path out of this, that if both the United States and Russia can get together and talk seriously about the critical issues of the day, and believe me, as important as everything is, there's nothing more critical than nuclear disarmament, because nuclear weapons are the one thing that can terminate all life on the planet. So this book provides a template of hope, and I would encourage people to read the book and hopefully learn something.
And they can get it where?
You can get it from claritypress.com. You can get it from Amazon. You can get it from Barnes and Nobles. But so far, you can't get it at any local bookstore. But hopefully, Diane, Cynthia, we're working on changing that, right?
Right, we are. So this has been a very remarkable conversation. For everybody that's listening to this, please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, and please subscribe and please pass it on to a friend or a relative, because this is really important information. So Scott, Diane, and Elena, you have a wonderful holiday season, and I'm sure we'll be talking again. And thank you everybody for listening. Have a great day.
Thank you.